What's going on, everyone? It is the Derv, and in today's video, I'm just going to come out and say it. Eunoia is meta. Time and time again, I come back to Eunoia when I'm in very sweaty endgame style activities, when I'm on the higher echelons of the power grind. Eunoia, when it first came out, I almost wrote it off. Okay, something that buffs my Hellion. Am I really ever going to spec into that? I was like, there's probably no way. There's so many other builds out there that I can think of that I have more fun with, on and on and on. Well, let me tell you something. I was dead wrong, and I'm here to eat some crow and share this build video with you. This build is so ridiculous when you get to higher endgame, 300, 400, 500 power level with the power delta. It basically negates that power delta because you will regenerate your super quickly, have unlimited orbs of power, and every single guardian on your fire team is going to love you for it. Here we go. Get us started on our Eunoia meta build. We got to talk about the super. The super of choice that I'm now running on this is Well of Radiance. Thrust your sword into the ground, damaging and scorching nearby targets. The sword projects a continuous aura, granting radiant effects and restoration to nearby allies, protecting them from the effects of stasis. Well of Radiance is going to also buff your allies as well with this same aura. So together as a fire team, you're going to be able to deal increased damage, withstand more damage output from enemies, and it's going to be particularly useful against pretty much all bosses. And when paired with the weapons that we've got on deck to talk about, it's going to be hard to top the damage output you're going to be able to do with this. For abilities, I recommend Phoenix Dive, Burst Glide. I prefer the Incinerator Snap and the Fusion Grenade. Now we're going to be able to double down on our Fusion Grenade and make it even slightly more powerful. For aspects, first up is Touch of Flame. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, the Fusion Grenade explodes twice. I'm not going to say this is a guaranteed stunning of an unstoppable champion with an ignition, but it's going to be pretty darn close in almost all situations. You may have to dump another couple rounds from a solar weapon into a champ to create that final, explosion, that ignition. But overall, in most activities, this is going to absolutely vaporize when paired with a fusion grenade. Next up is the Hellion. You're going to absolutely need the Hellion in order to take advantage of our Eunoia exotic armor. Activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. Add to that the fact that you're going to be able to deal additional either scorch damage or weapon damage depending on how you like to pair things up. And you've got yourself an absolute powerhouse of chipping away at enemies from a relatively safe distance. Again, Hellion doesn't go forever. In other words, you can't stand a football field away and have your Hellion just absolutely wreck the battlefield. You got to be kind of up close and personal. But between the Hellion, being able to roam around, you're not going to necessarily have to always be looking in the direction of enemies. Your Hellion's going to deal... It's just going to rain down, solar damage and scorching damage on enemies surrounding you. Even if you're running away from enemies, you can Phoenix Dive into the ground, flip the camera around behind you, and before you're even popped up and turned around in your character and the camera resets, the Hellion has already launched itself at least once and split off into multiple munitions and just rained fire down behind you. So it's so much better in higher end activity than I anticipated, but time and time again, I'm going back to this Hellion build. For fragments, first up is going to be Ember of Ashes. You apply more scorch stacks to targets. Pivotal, necessary, non-negotiable. You need as much scorch as possible. Second up is going to be Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. The first of three ways we're going to be able to regenerate our abilities simply by doing solar stuff. Plus 10 to class, that's always a good thing. Remember, your fire sprites grant grenade energy. Next up, we're going to be Ember of Solace. Radiant and Restoration effects applied to you have increased duration. You'll be able to proc Radiant, pretty darn often. And if for no other reason, you're going to be Radiant when you pop your Well of Radiance. I feel like that goes without saying, but the ability to have those effects applied to you extended means that when your Well goes away, you still have additional cooldown time until you actually lose your Radiant buff, just so you know. Last but not least, Ember of Singeing. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. So the play of this is going to be pop your Hellion, then start loading up, dumping your ammo into enemies everywhere. Let your Hellion hit as many enemies as possible. And by the time your Hellion has ceased, you'll be ready for another Hellion. It literally is that simple of a cycle. For armor stat distribution, I recommend speccing into weapons, super, melee, and then class ability in that order. You can make an argument with this that you should only spec into weapons, class, and super. The problem with that is if you spec into weapons, you're automatically going to get your secondary as your grenade. So what I like to do is if I'm going to go with Gunner in a couple of different armor slots, what I like to do is try to get Gunner paired with either melee as the tertiary stat or class as the tertiary stat. You could also make an argument of running class specific armor, specialist armor, where you get class, weapons, and then either melee, grenade, and super. You want your super to be at least at 100. Now, you might be asking yourself, Durf, you have Well of Radiance. Super over 100 isn't going to give you damage buff. Well, kind of. The way that it works, and someone can fact check me on this, and also if I am wrong, please correct me in the comments so that everybody can kind of understand this a little bit better. But over 100 with Well of Radiance grants you additional cooldown of your Well of Radiance. Now, that's not 1 second per stat, over 100. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And to be honest, if that were the case, I'd be running 200 super in this build. But it does add at least 1/10 of a second. I think it's every 10. I think it's every 10 weapon stats above 100. Someone needs to fact check me on that, because as I say it, it feels like that's kind of lower than what I initially thought when I researched this. But I don't have my computer open at the same time as making this video, so I do apologize. But you get additional cooldown time regardless for your Well of Radiance. So it's not technically wasted super stat, but you don't necessarily want to go ridiculous and go all the way up to 150. If you're going to go 150 in anything, you can make an argument for class or weapons. What we want to do is be able to use our weapons at the same time as Hellion to help get us back our Hellion. In so doing, we're going to be able to generate obscene amounts of damage from a safe distance that allows us to regenerate our super quicker. And remember, super is based on weapon damage as well as just your base cooldown. So the more weapon damage you put out, the more damage in general you put out, the quicker your super regenerates. There's other things you can do to make this go a little bit faster, but I'm not looking to spam my Well of Radiance. I'm looking to spam my Hellion. So when you're looking at builds as far as stat distribution, what I did was I kind of made it based on Paragon armor. So I wanted my super stat to get to 100, boom, as quickly as possible. If I got some Paragon armor that had weapons as a tertiary stat, I dumped a little extra into that tertiary stat to get me closer to 100. Then I got a couple of gunner. Well, you know what? I can just show you right now how I did it. Okay, so what I did here was I have 1 Paragon, 2 Paragon, 1 gunner, 1 grenadier, and another Paragon. Now with the Paragons, I had 2 Paragons in super melee and class, and then I had a 3rd Paragon in just super melee weapons. That way I was able to get up to 30 weapons with a weapon mod. Then in the gunner stats, I have maxed out the weapons, and I picked a gunner that had grenade and melee as the tertiary stat. Eunoia, I got kind of lucky on it. Rolled with a grenadier with super and class as the tertiary stat, so I was able to dump extra stats into the class ability. But if you do it like that, you can get somewhere around close to where I'm at. Now, super, again, you can make an argument that, hey, just dump it into 100. Once you get to 100, you're all good to go. But when you're speccing into things like Paragon because you want some additional melee energy, and again, I got a little bit lucky, but if you're doing portal activities, if you're doing, PvP activities, you're getting higher and higher in the ranks. You see I'm at 407. I'm definitely not that close to maxing out my character yet. But you're going to start getting tier 3, tier 4 drops that'll have some stat spikes that will be able to complement each other. You don't want to go all for Paragon. You don't want to go all for Grenadier or Specialist or anything like that. But Paragon seems to be kind of the happy medium. I get my super stat kind of where I need it to go first. Then I switch to focusing on Gunner. And if this had kind of worked out a little bit differently where I had my tertiary stat in weapons, for example, there, and then let's just say there too, okay? What I would have done is instead of putting a class buff onto, some of these other pieces, well, I guess I only use it on one, but I would have used the class buff more if I had that extra, that tertiary stat in weapons, say for like this right here, the Tech Sec Hood. I have 20 in class. Well, if that 20 had gone into weapons, I obviously wouldn't have put a 10 spot into the weapons to get my weapons up higher. I would have taken the 20 and put the 10 into class. Now, keep in mind, if it goes into weapons as a tertiary stat, that means that the 15 and the 20 you see on the screen would be flipped. Would that fundamentally change where I'm at right now? No, I'd be at 73 instead of 78. Still over 100% ability cooldown. What you want to do is get your class ability to at least a 70. I ran this build for a long time at about 60. I think was where I kind of topped it out at, and even in the 50s. This build still worked. For those of you who don't have higher stat armors, this build does still work when you have a class ability in the 60s and the 50s. You just have to go a little bit slower. You see the class ability cooldown at 31 seconds. In the 50s and 60s, that's increased very slightly. We're still not talking about a full minute cooldown, okay? And add to that the fact that you're going to be scorching targets regardless. So you might have to lean onto your weapons a little bit more to add some more scorching. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to talk about the weapons, why this works. Then I'll go into the armor archetype that I'm using and why I'm using it. And then hopefully that'll kind of make sense as to the overall encompassment of the build, so to speak, so that no matter what you're doing, whether weapons, spamming your Hellion, or possibly even popping your super, you've got the best rounded, solar warlock in this build that you can possibly have. So first up, the only weapon that you need in the kinetic slot is Outbreak Perfected. Outbreak Perfected is perfect for dealing with barrier champs, which are in practically everything. Also remember, this is a shield piercing weapon because of the artifacts. So you can shoot through Cabal shields. You can shoot through pretty much any shield that's out there, unless it's a mechanic shield, so to speak. But Outbreak Perfected is amazing. If you don't have Outbreak Perfected, you can always put on Giver's Blessing. Get a Giver's Blessing. Here, I'll show you right now, just so you can see. Get a Giver's Blessing that has this roll right here. Demolitionist and Kinetic Tremors. If you're not going to use Outbreak Perfected, this is the weapon to use in place of it, and the only weapon I recommend for it. Go farm in the loot cave. I have a video of how to do that on my channel, and go get yourself a Giver's Blessing with Kinetic Tremors and Demolitionist. You'll thank me, because your Demolitionist is going to give you your grenade back faster, which Outbreak technically can't do, and Outbreak technically can't proc Kinetic Tremors, so you'll still have additional ways of damaging the enemy. What we have to do in place of this is you'll have to put a pulse rifle on your energy slot. I really like running with Returned Memory. Now, I don't have huge numbers of kills with this because I literally just got this roll not that long ago, but you can make an argument for putting on Ahab Char if you want to deal with overloads. You can make an argument for Finite Impactor. You can make an argument for Might of Mini Tool, again, for overloads. Or you can do Stars in Shadow for your pulse rifle option if you want to do barriers, if you've got an auto rifle in your kinetic slot. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding. It really doesn't matter what you put in the energy slot as far as being able to stack scorching stacks. Ideally, it'll be something that has either incandescent or burning ambition with a rapid fire rate if you have burning ambition. So you can add scorch stacks through burning ambition and add to the possible ignitions on virtually every enemy. When you get to higher end content, you will be dumping enough rounds into every single enemy to scorch them. So your class ability will be back all the time. Last, in the heavy slot, I got lucky with this roll, okay? So I understand some people are going to look at this and go, Durf, I don't have a tier 5. I'm not going to get a tier 5 for a while. Believe me, I get it. I suffered through Trials of Osiris for quite a while until this randomly dropped from a loss that I endured. But you can roll this with a bunch of great perks, and I'm just going to go through the one that I think is most important for what we're trying to do. Auto-loading holster means you can unload the magazine, rack it on your back, and forget about it until you hear that reloading sound, and then you can pull it back out. What that means is that in this fourth column, you've got a couple of options that really work awesome. The first is going to be bait and switch. You get an increase of 30% extra damage for, I think it's 8 seconds. At 450 rounds a minute, I don't know, you gotta do the math on what that comes out to in 8 seconds, but you can go through almost the whole magazine in that amount of time. Again, your magazine is 55 rounds. You could throw on a backup mag and increase that a little bit, but I bait and switch with the extra damage. On top of it being a featured weapon, you're getting 30% on top of the artifact bump of 10% at a tier 5, 8% at a tier 4, 6% I think at a tier 3, and like 4 or 2% at tier 2 and tier 1. So you're going to get extra damage on top of extra damage. And then if you do decide to throw on Burning Ambition with the auto-loading holster, just whip it out, dump all the rounds in it so you create as many ignitions as possible, and then throw it back on your back, go back to your Outbreak Perfected or your Giver's Blessing, and go ahead and continue to pull this back out once it reloads, especially during boss battles, because you're going to be generating a ridiculous amount of ammo with your Outbreak Perfected. If you don't have Unwavering Duty, you can always put on a solar weapon of your choice in the heavy slot. You can also make an argument for throwing on a Strand rocket launcher. Now, Strand, it doesn't really play into solar. However, with the dual siphon mods, you can throw a dual siphon mod on if you have the space in your helmet. I also forgot to make a mention, if you do want to put a barrier option here, you can also run with Polaris Lance. So you will be able to generate more ignitions by dumping precision rounds into that boss, for example. So 3 different ways, multiple different ways between these 3 weapons that you can generate huge amounts of damage. And we're not even talking about Eunoia yet and the Hellion. So Eunoia, when this exotic armor first came out, we were all, and some are still, if you're not able to play the game that often, I understand. Believe me, I fully understand. But Eunoia, when it first came out, I was very underwhelmed by it. I almost made a video that said, Eunoia is kind of pointless. So I have this armor that just makes my Hellion bigger and more powerful. Well, that's great, considering that the Hellion means I have to go slower. Well, let me tell you something about that take. I'm glad I didn't put that out, because I would be eating a lot of crow right now. As you get higher in the power grind, when you hit that 300 mark and you're starting to get these enemies that hit a lot harder and you're like, oh, wow, hold on. And you put these modifiers on the portal activities and they start hitting harder. It only gets worse from there. Then you get to 350 where you're going to be teetering on 400 level enemies. Then you get to 400. Now you have a minus 30 power delta. What Eunoia essentially does is it levels the gap between the damage output of your Guardian and stacking damages together to try to make up for that. What Hellion basically turns into is additional tick damage on top of your weapon damage. So again, the cycle of play is pop your Hellion, dump either your Outbreak Perfected or your Giver's Blessing into the enemies, generate additional Scorch with your solar weapons, and then pop Hellion again over and over and over again. Remember, you don't have to stay in the same place. You can roam around the battlefield. You get, I think it's 15 or 16 seconds of Hellion. That's a long time to generate a bunch of Scorch. And when you're in those higher end activities, if you have weapons that have burning ambition on them, yeah, I know running double primary isn't like the greatest thing since sliced bread to do, but running a rapid fire auto rifle like Ahab Char, or running the Mida, the new Mida with burning ambition, I mean, you're going to generate a ton of Scorch on top of the Eunoia. And oh, by the way, we haven't even talked about chucking your grenade and your melee out at the same time or during that cycle cooldown of the Hellion. To say that you won't get your Hellion back if you have your class stat at least at a 70 by the time it cools down, if you can't kind of cycle through your abilities, go practice it. I'm telling you. You can virtually have infinite Hellion with a build with class at least 70. For the rest of the armor, go ahead and spec into whatever general armor mod that you need. For the helmet, I highly recommend putting on a heavy ammo finder. I also recommend throwing on a kinetic siphon and a harmonic siphon. Now, if you want to ditch the harmonic siphon because you're really only going to be spamming your Giver's Blessing or your Outbreak Perfected, what I recommend doing if you want to get your super quicker, drop your weapons or your general armor mod down to a 1 energy, which is just a +5 instead of a +10. And in the final slot, here, I'll show you right here just so you can get the visual on it. Go ahead and put on Dynamo. Reduce your super cooldown when using your class ability near targets. Dynamo does pair with Hellion. How fast you get it back, is it really going to make a difference? Maybe a little bit. It's not like I'm diving into a group of enemies and throwing my Hellion down with 10 enemies around me. I'm doing this from a semi-distance. So the idea of me actually being up close and personal isn't going to happen as much. But if you want to spam your super more, go ahead and throw on Dynamo. So for the gauntlets, go ahead and put on Firepower, Heavy-Handed, and Fastball. What this will do is make you be able to throw your fusion grenade faster. And when you whittle down those enemies with your Hellion, you can chuck out your grenade or your melee, finish them off, and generate yourself a free overpower. For the chest, go ahead and put on 3 damage resistance mods. The reason I'm recommending 3 damage resistance mods is simply because you're going to be a target. You're not going to be, able to be up close and personal like you would if you were running, let's just say, Lightning Surge. So having resistance mods with a build like this is going to be key. Plus also with your Well of Radiance, any resistance mods that you have stack somewhat with the Well of Radiance on top of it as far as healing. For the leg armor, go ahead and put on Insulation, Absolution, put in 1 Insulation and double Absolution. The reason this works so well on this is your class ability already has very low cooldown, so the Insulation is going to help it. The reason that Absolution makes the most sense here is you're not technically looking to spam your melee and your grenade. You might be able to get that if you have rolls of your armor where you're able to spec closer to a 100 stat. But again, 100 stats in melee or grenade or even above 100 stat and super are not necessary. What you want is weapons and class first and foremost. But again, it depends on how your armor rolls and if you're trying to get as much balance out of your character as possible. Last but not least, and this probably goes without saying, make sure you put your class font on. Whenever you collect an Orb of Power, the first Orb of Power gives you a +20 to your class stat. So the reason this also works if you're at a 70 is your first Orb of Power bumps you up to a 90 class stat regeneration. I don't know what that comes out to percentage-wise, but it's closer to 190 than it would be if you were at 70. So do the math. Let's just say it's 180 for the sake of the argument. Well, 180 or 175 or even 170% regen over what you're at now is going to be, so much better at a 30-second cooldown. Make sure you round it out by putting on your class ability Reaper, and then make sure you have Outreach on or something else. Outreach makes the most sense because your melee cools down the slowest. However, you could put the Bomber on. I guess technically you could put another Reaper on here if you want a more powerful Orb of Power, or I guess you could ditch Reaper altogether and just put on another class font. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that. It's kind of redundant. But if you get that class font, or if you get that class stat over 100, then when you pop your class ability, you'll get an overshield on top of it. Again, the featured gear that I have is the Tech Sec. You deal significantly increased kinetic damage to combatant shields, overshields, vehicles, and constructs. Constructs include barricades, turrets, stasis crystals, and other objects created in the field. At 4 pieces, you get concussive rounds, which is defeating powerful combatants or breaking a combatant shield with kinetic damage, releases a disorienting kinetic shockwave. This is a disorienting kinetic shockwave. So what that means is if you are using Outbreak Perfected in a endgame style activity, virtually every enemy is going to have a shield. So as you pop that shield in a group of enemies, all those enemies are going to be disoriented. This is only going to make you more potent in, endgame activity, which is why Hellion is so freaking good with Eunoia in endgame activity. For the artifact mods, we're going to go through this really quick. Make sure you have on Overload Rapid Fire, Unstoppable Sidearm and Hand Cannon, and Anti-Barrier Scout and Pulse. With those 3 activated, you can swap out weapon archetypes and not have to worry about if you're going to have champ coverage or not. In the second column, make sure you have Flame Fiber and Freeze, because if you are running a strand heavy weapon, you're going to be able to double down on getting orbs of power from all 3 weapons still. Also, make sure you have on Light Forged Lead. Kinetic weapons getting increased ammo generation. Collecting an orb of power increases this benefit for a short duration. You'll see that procced on the left-hand side of your screen when it's activated. In the third column, make sure you have Refresh Threads on so that when you pick up your matching elemental pickup, it grants energy to your least charged ability. Also, make sure you have on Fever and Chill. If you are using a rapid fire frame rate, the solar weapons will proc Radiant a lot quicker than the slower firing ones. In the fourth column, make sure that you have Elemental Daze, since we're going to be taking this in the higher end content anyway, so we're going to be stunning champs regularly. Make sure you have on Elemental Coalescence so that you get elemental pickups matching your equipped super, and then put on that Fresh Bullets smell so that picking up an ammo break gives your kinetic weapons increased damage for a short duration. This is also going to encourage you to run through your special ammo and your heavy ammo weapons regularly. In the final column, make sure you put on Radiant Shrapnel. This is especially useful in higher end content because you're dumping so many bullets into enemies anyways. So being able to get that solar projectile on top of the Hellion, it's just additional tick damage, and you're going to need all the help you can get. Last but not least, make sure you put on a Shield Crush. While you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or Avoid Overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. While you have Amplified or Radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. Because, again, we're going to be able to proc Radiant both with the artifact and our Well of Radiance. Having increased damage and recharge rate is very helpful. Now, if you didn't want to use this, the only other one that would make a lot of sense, I guess technically, would be Elemental Overdrive. But it's only going to work on solar weapons when you get the elemental pickup for the increased damage. It won't work on your kinetic weapons. So you'll kind of have to, negotiate how you want to set, that up. So anyways, that is the build. Let me know anything you guys would change in the comments. I welcome all feedback. Let me know how it works for you. Let me know how it goes in game for yourself as you're going into those harder activities. Maybe you're not quite at Ultimate. Maybe you're not even quite at Grandmaster, and maybe you're just getting into Master. Wherever you are on your journey, this build is still going to work for you very, very well. So let me know in the comments what you think. I welcome all feedback, and that's what makes this game awesome, is people like to pair different things with different builds and make it their own. If you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there who could benefit from a video like this, please consider sharing with them or send them my way. My goal is to help as many people as possible. As always, I will have a dim link in the video description. And if by chance you are looking for a non-toxic gaming community, I highly recommend hopping in my Discord. It's very active. There's no toxicity, and it's just Guardians helping Guardians do Guardian things. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to those in my comments in previous videos. This build is for you guys, helping me come up with ideas to help others. So this boss battle is one of the better ways of showcasing how this build is self-sustainable. Thing about this boss battle, if you've been doing the reclaim activities, there's not a lot of enemies at any given point during this boss battle. You have a very tanky boss that takes a lot of damage. It's a bullet sponge. And you're just kind of left to hopefully have your abilities come back on their own. The fact that this build at higher endgame content without a lot of adds is self-sustaining sets it apart from other builds that require ad-dense activity. Think about some of the builds that I've come out with so far in this season. And again, we're not done. I still have plenty more to throw at you guys, hopefully enjoy in the future. Eunoia plus Solar in general, with the fragments that we have, with the aspects that we have, by itself, one-on-one with the boss, you can regenerate virtually all of your abilities that you are heavily reliant on, specifically your Hellion, and also be able to constantly heal yourself. Remember, every time that you cast your class ability, you cure yourself. So if you're able to spam your class ability well, so you're able to spam right at the same time, you got it, cure. Well, add to that the fact that you're dealing huge damage numbers with your Outbreak Perfected or whatever, weapons that you're pairing with this. And you're going to get your Well of Radiance back. Again, we've only been in this essentially, a minute. And again, not ad dense, not super busy, not super sweaty like onslaught activities, for example, in comparison, or even maybe your favorite strike. There's more traversal in a reclaim activity. And this build, it's always got something for you to use beyond your weapons. And when you think about other builds that require more adds, when you think about other builds where it's like, okay, maybe you like running, punchy builds or melee spam builds or even grenade spam builds, that's all fine and dandy. But when you get to a part of an activity where, guess what, you can't self-proc your other abilities quite like you can self-proc your Hellion. Suddenly you're kind of limited in what you can pick as far as what you can take into endgame. Think about the Grandmasters that we don't really have anymore. Well, the Portal and the Grandmaster difficulty theoretically replace that, I guess, somehow. Well, the negative 30 power delta that you're going to face once you hit 300, 400, 500 level, activities, now your weapons are just not enough. I mean, I guess you could make an argument of that. Your weapons not being enough, because obviously with the best weapons you can get, you're still going to be able to get through that endgame activity. Eunoia shortens that length. Eunoia generates additional tick damage. Eunoia essentially regenerates itself. I don't know if there's anything else besides maybe your sentient soul with Getaway Artist that can generate your turret as fast and as efficiently with a 30-second cooldown at a 70 class stat, or a stat in general, as, Eunoia and your Hellion. So anyways, I know that was a little bit rambly. Thanks for sticking with me through this video. Again, if you did find anything helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. Share it with a Guardian in need. Let me know in the comments what you think of the build and how it's working for you. And also let me know your power grind. I want everyone to get to that top level. I will see you guys next time. Thanks as always for your support. Take care.